I thought my engagement party would be the happiest day of my life until my parents called me at 2 in the morning, not to congratulate me, but to demand I cancel it. Why? Because my little sister had just received a promotion, and they wanted the entire family to celebrate her instead. At first, I laughed, thinking it was a cruel joke, but they were dead serious. When I refused, they screamed that I was ungrateful, selfish, humiliating my sister. I hung up, shaken. But the next morning, I discovered something that shattered me even more. The call came at 2 a.m., piercing through the darkness like a siren I couldn't escape. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. When I answered, my mother's voice was sharp and demanding. "Emily, you need to cancel your engagement party. Your sister just got promoted, and the family has to celebrate her instead. It wouldn't look good if both events are so close. Think of Sarah. Don't be selfish." For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. My party had been planned for months. The date circled on calendars, deposits paid, invitations sent. My heart thumped in my chest as I tried to laugh it off. "You're joking, right? You can't be serious?" But her tone grew colder. "We are serious. Sarah has worked so hard for this. How dare you think your party is more important than her achievement? Cancel it. It's the right thing to do." I could hear my father in the background, his voice like a gavel. "Do as we say. Don't embarrass us. Don't humiliate your sister." I sat up in bed, the glow of the screen lighting my trembling hands. Torn between fury and guilt, my mind screamed with contradictions. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down, to scream back that my life mattered too. But another part, the well-trained daughter who had spent her entire life pleasing them, froze. My throat tightened. If I said no, would I lose my parents completely? Tell me, if it were you, would you hang up, or would you give in with tears streaming down your face? I swallowed hard. "I'm not canceling it," I whispered, my voice shaking but firm. Silence followed. Then my mother hissed, "Ungrateful girl, you've humiliated your sister." The call ended with a sharp click, leaving me staring into the void of my bedroom, heart hammering. I barely slept. My body lay heavy on the mattress, but my mind raced. At sunrise, my phone buzzed again. A message from Sarah. Just one line. "You always have to steal what's mine." Those words sliced deeper than anything my parents said. And suddenly, the memory reel began to play in my head. I remembered my 18th birthday, when my parents spent the whole evening praising Sarah's piano recital, instead of acknowledging me. I remembered my college graduation, when Sarah arrived in a dazzling white dress, drawing every eye away from me in my cap and gown. Even at my friend's wedding, Sarah showed up uninvited, wearing a gown so striking the bride whispered to me, "Is she trying to upstage me, or you?" But the one that still stung was my 25th birthday. I had saved for weeks to host a small dinner with friends. Sarah announced a surprise vacation for herself the night before, and my parents canceled my dinner to throw her a farewell brunch. I ended up eating takeout in my apartment, watching photos of their celebration flood social media. I had ignored all of it. I told myself I was overreacting, that family always comes first, that someday they would see me too. But now, staring at Sarah's venomous text, the truth pressed against my chest like a blade. Maybe I had been invisible all along. I sat down at my desk, opened a notebook, and began to write. My handwriting shook as I scribbled the words. I just want to be loved like a normal daughter. Not compared, not replaced, not erased. My tears smudged the ink, blurring the confession into something raw and messy. For once, I allowed myself to feel the ache I had buried. The room grew quiet except for the scratch of my pen. But then another memory surfaced, one I had buried even deeper. A night years ago, when Sarah had shown up to a college party with a man on her arm, handsome, kind, attentive. I remembered watching from the corner, a strange flutter in my stomach. His name was Daniel. Daniel, my fiancé now. My stomach lurched as the puzzle pieces clicked together. Sarah's text, her bitterness, her obsession with the spotlight. She had dated Daniel before me. He had never told me. She had never stopped reminding me, subtly, cruelly, that I was always second. The blood drained from my face. My pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the desk. I thought my family's betrayal had already broken me, but this was a different kind of devastation. And the worst part, I realized I wasn't even sure who I should be angrier at, Sarah for flaunting him years ago, or Daniel for never confessing. I pressed my hands to my face, the sob rising before I could stop it. My chest ached with the weight of secrets, of always being last, of never being chosen. I had tried so hard to be the daughter, the sister, the fiancé everyone needed. But maybe I had been nothing more than a placeholder all along. I wiped my tears and looked at the notebook. The last words I had written seemed to glow back at me. I just want to be loved. And yet, the echo of Sarah's text thundered louder. You always have to steal what's mine. My hands shook as I picked up my phone again. I wanted to call Daniel, to scream, to demand answers, but my thumb hovered, frozen. If I heard the truth, I wasn't sure I could survive it. The silence of the room pressed in, heavy and suffocating. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Outside, the world went on, as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything had shifted, because now the question wasn't whether my parents wanted me to cancel my engagement. The question was whether the man I loved had ever truly been mine at all. The night of my engagement party was supposed to be filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. Instead, there were empty seats where my parents should have been. I stood near the entrance in a pale blue dress, watching the room fill with friends and colleagues, but every time the door opened, my heart jumped, expecting to see my family walk in. They never did. Daniel squeezed my hand, whispering, "Maybe they're running late." But as the hours passed, I knew the truth. They weren't coming. My phone buzzed, a notification. I opened it, and my stomach twisted. Sarah's Instagram story, a photo of her holding a champagne glass, captioned, "Some people just can't handle sharing the spotlight." Laughter in the background, familiar faces surrounding her. Faces that should have been here celebrating me. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My cheeks burned as if every guest had seen the post. I plastered on a smile for the crowd, but inside I was unraveling. I excused myself, rushing to the restroom where the music muffled behind the door. I leaned over the sink, my reflection pale and trembling. How could they? On the one night that was mine, they had chosen her again. The door creaked, and my best friend Lily slipped in, her expression tense. She held her phone toward me, lowering her voice. "Emily, you need to see this." On the screen was another image, Sarah surrounded by my parents, relatives, even family friends. They weren't just at her promotion dinner. They had thrown her a private party. the same night as mine. The betrayal slammed into me with such force, I staggered backward, gripping the counter. "Everyone's there," Lily whispered, guilt in her eyes as though delivering the news was her crime. "They planned it for tonight." I pressed a hand to my chest, the fabric of my dress damp with sudden sweat. A laugh broke from me, sharp, hollow, too close to a sob. My parents hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been too busy. They had deliberately abandoned me to celebrate her. By the time I returned to the ballroom, my smile had cracked. The speeches blurred, the music sounded tinny. I went through the motions, clinking glasses, posing for photos, but inside I was a hollow shell. I kept seeing Sarah's smirk, my parents' arms draped around her. The party ended, guests trickled out, and I felt colder than the winter air outside. Daniel kissed my forehead, murmuring, "Don't let them ruin this." But his words felt thin, flimsy against the weight crushing me. Later, alone in my apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. This time, the number was unfamiliar. My finger hovered over the screen before I opened it. One photo appeared. It was a screenshot. At the top of the screen, the name of the group chat glared back at me. "Family without Emily." I scrolled, my heart racing. "Don't worry, she'll be fine. She always forgives eventually. She doesn't need to be in the will anyway. Sarah's the responsible one. Let's just make sure she doesn't find out about the loan." My breath caught. Loan? My name appeared in another message. "Got the paperwork signed under Emily's name. She'll never check." I dropped the phone as if it burned me. The room tilted. My body shook uncontrollably, sobs ripping out of me. I pulled my knees to my chest, gasping for air. It wasn't just neglect, it wasn't just favoritism. They were stealing from me. Images flashed through my mind, my parents smiling at holidays, Sarah slipping her arm through mine, telling me we were inseparable. Lies, all of it. The laughter, the affection, every hug now felt like a blade, twisting deeper. Tears streamed down my face. I wasn't just losing my family, I was realizing I never truly had them. For a long time, I sat in silence, the phone lying face up on the floor, cruel words still glowing. My chest hurt from crying, my throat raw. I wanted to sleep, to forget, but the words replayed like a curse. Family without Emily. Finally, I picked up the phone again, wiping my wet cheeks with the back of my hand. I scrolled slower this time, every word carving itself into me. She'll cave eventually, she always does. They didn't see me as a daughter, they saw me as a pawn. And then my eyes caught another line, almost hidden in the thread. If she ever finds out, we'll say she misunderstood. She's too emotional to think clearly. Gaslighting. They were planning it in advance. They knew I might discover the truth, and they were already preparing to discredit me. I pressed the phone against my chest, rocking slightly as though I could cradle myself. The sobs eased into quiet hiccups. My body ached, but a strange clarity started to seep in. Through the cracks of my despair. If I stayed silent, I would lose everything. My money, my dignity, my future. But if I fought back, I knew what it would cost me. I would lose my family. The thought pulsed inside me like a drumbeat, relentless, terrifying. If I stayed silent, I would lose everything. If I fought, I would lose them. My tears dried on my cheeks, leaving salt trails that itched under the dim light. My hands clenched around the phone, trembling but steadying with each passing breath. For the first time, I began to wonder, maybe losing them wasn't the worst thing that could happen. The morning after I discovered the group chat, I woke up with swollen eyes and a raw throat. My body felt heavy, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. Every word from that chat replayed like a cruel chorus. She always caves. She doesn't need to be in the will. I realized I couldn't just sit there, drowning in betrayal. If I did nothing, I would lose more than pride. I would lose everything I had worked for. So I began to act, quietly, carefully. The first thing I did was dig into my financial records. I logged into my bank accounts, pulling statements for the last 5 years. It was tedious, my eyes burning as numbers blurred across the screen. But there it was, withdrawals and transfers I hadn't made, subtle amounts trickling away each month. The names tied to them were suspicious, connected to accounts I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened as I printed them all out, creating a folder labeled simply Evidence. Next, I searched my parents' old iPad, which had been left behind after they upgraded. It was slow, cracked at the edges, but still alive. I remembered the passcode. It hadn't changed in years. My hands trembled as I tapped it in, the screen flickering to life. Emails, old documents. My breath caught as I scrolled. Buried in a folder titled House Papers was a contract, fresh and waiting for signatures. I opened it, a property transfer agreement. My parents were signing over one of the family homes to Sarah exclusively. My name was absent, erased entirely from the list of heirs, but that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the contract, I saw it. A shaky, poorly forged scrawl. My own name, my own signature. I dropped the iPad onto the couch, my visions swimming. They had forged my approval. My own family was not just stealing from me. They were fabricating my consent to bury me legally. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stop the scream that threatened to escape. The betrayal was now more than emotional. It was criminal. And I knew in that moment that I couldn't trust them ever again. But if I wanted justice, I couldn't just be angry. I had to be strategic. That night, I installed a recording app on my phone. Every call with my parents, every conversation with Sarah, every sly comment, I recorded it all. I began saving screenshots, backing them up on an external drive. I bought a small notebook where I wrote down times, dates, and details of each interaction. I had no idea if this would hold in court, but I knew it would hold in truth. Still, I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out. The first person I called was Lily. When I told her about the forged signature, she gasped, "Emily, this is serious. You need legal help." She put me in touch with a lawyer she trusted, a woman named Rachel. Sitting across from Rachel in her polished office, I slid the iPad and the bank statements across the desk. Her brows knit as she read. Then she looked up, eyes sharp. "Emily, this is fraud. You have a case, but you need more. You need a timeline, a paper trail, and allies." Her words became my blueprint. I reached out to my aunt, my mother's estranged sister, who had always been in on the fringes of family events. To my surprise, she welcomed me with warmth. Over tea, she confessed that she too had been cut out years ago, her inheritance swallowed by the same manipulation. "You're not alone, Emily," she said, squeezing my hand. "They've done this before, but this time you can stop them." Her words gave me strength I didn't know I still had. And yet, even as I gathered allies, I still carried the weight of guilt. In a moment of weakness, I booked a session with a therapist. Sitting on that soft couch, I let the words tumble out. I don't want revenge. I don't want to destroy them. I just want justice. I just want to breathe without guilt pressing on my chest. Tears spilled freely, and for once I didn't stop them. My therapist nodded, her voice calm but firm. Wanting justice isn't cruelty, Emily. It's survival. For the first time in days, I felt lighter, but the universe wasn't done shaking me. That night, I opened Reddit, scrolling mindlessly to distract myself. A direct message popped up from a stranger. "You don't know me," it read, "but I know Sarah. She scammed my friend out of thousands. She pretended to need money for school, but spent it on luxury trips. I thought you should know." Attached was proof, screenshots of messages, bank transfers, Sarah's name linked unmistakably. I sat back, staring at the screen. My sister wasn't just manipulative, she was a con artist, and now I had evidence from someone outside the family. The walls of her perfect image were beginning to crumble. I closed my laptop slowly, my heart pounding with a new rhythm. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about ending the cycle of lies that had chained me for decades. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote 4 words: "Choose the day wisely." Because deep down, I knew. It was no longer a question of if I would fight back. The only question left was when. The house glowed with Christmas lights, wreaths hanging on every door, the smell of cinnamon and pine drifting through the air. On the surface, it looked like a picture-perfect family holiday. But inside me, every step up the porch felt like I was walking into a battlefield. My heart pounded as I gripped the folder of documents in my bag, my phone charged with recordings, the iPad tucked under my arm. Tonight was the night. The living room was full, relatives laughing, children running, glasses clinking. My parents moved through the crowd like royalty, Sarah beaming at their side in a shimmering red dress. No one looked at me with suspicion. To them, I was still the obedient daughter. I waited. I let them toast, exchange gifts, pose for photos. My palms were damp, my throat tight. Then, when silence fell as my father raised his glass, I stepped forward. "I have something to share," I said, my voice steady despite the quake in my chest. Heads turned, conversations stilled. I placed the iPad on the table, connecting it to the television. With a few taps, the first screenshot appeared. The group chat titled, "Family Without Emily." Gasps echoed, whispers spread like fire. My father's smile froze, Sarah's wineglass slipped, staining the carpet. I advanced slide after slide, bank statements, loan papers, the forged property contract. Each revelation struck harder than the last. When I finished, the silence was suffocating. My parents stared, stone-faced. Then my mother let out a sharp gasp, clutching her chest. We had no idea. Sarah, how could you do this to your sister?" The shift was almost theatrical. My father's voice boomed, "We trusted you, Sarah. How dare you forge Emily's name?" A murmur rippled through the room. For a moment, I faltered. Were they really going to push everything onto her? Sarah's eyes widened, tears streaking her makeup. She shook her head violently. "No, it wasn't just me. Don't you dare put this all on me." Her voice cracked, loud enough to silence even the children. She turned toward the room, her chest heaving. "It wasn't just me. Dad planned everything." The words hung in the air like a bomb detonating. Gasps, stares. All eyes shifted to my father. His face reddened, his jaw set. "That's a lie," he roared, his voice vibrating with anger. "She's hysterical. She's always been jealous of Emily." I could feel the confusion swirl in the crowd. Some leaned toward my father's authority, others toward Sarah's desperation. I knew this was the moment they'd try to twist the narrative, to gaslight everyone just as they always had me. Before they could, I spoke. "You want proof?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. With a press of a button, recordings filled the room. My father's voice, cold and calculated. "Sign it under Emily's name. She won't check. She never does." A ripple of shock swept through the family. My mother lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. "That's out of context. You're twisting everything. Emily has always been emotional. You know how she exaggerates." Her voice wavered between feigned sorrow and sharp accusation. But I was ready. "This isn't exaggeration. This is fraud. This is betrayal." As if on cue, the doors opened. Rachel, my lawyer, stepped inside, invited secretly by me. Her presence alone shifted the air. She held up a folder. "I've reviewed all of this, every document, every statement. These are legitimate. Emily is telling the truth." The room erupted. Relatives whispered furiously, eyes darting from my parents to Sarah to me. My father sputtered, his hands trembling. "You brought a lawyer to Christmas?" "Yes," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Because this family stopped being a family the moment you decided I was expendable." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a voice trembled but clear. My aunt, the same woman who had once confided her own story to me, stood up. Her hands clutched the armrest of her chair. "They did the same to me," she said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. "They cut me out. They forged my name too. I stayed silent, thinking it was my fault, but it wasn't. It never was." Her words cracked something open in the room. More murmurs, more shifting stares. A cousin shook his head, muttering, "I always wondered why she disappeared from the family business." Another relative whispered, "If they did it to her, what else have they done?" The web was unraveling, thread by thread. My father pounded his fist against the table. "Enough of this circus. This is slander. We are your parents. How dare you disgrace us like this?" But his voice no longer carried the same weight. The doubt was spreading, his authority corroding before my eyes. I stepped closer, my eyes fixed on him. My hands no longer trembled. "You taught me loyalty meant silence, but silence is what gave you power. Tonight, that ends." The living room, once filled with Christmas cheer, was now charged with tension so thick it was suffocating. My family's empire of lies, built for decades, was crumbling under the weight of truth. And as I looked around, at Sarah sobbing, at my mother gasping, at my father raging, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if one voice had spoken up, how many more would follow? In the days after Christmas, the ripple effect was immediate. What began as a confrontation in a decorated living room spread far beyond the walls of that house. A cousin had secretly recorded the entire exchange, and within hours, the video was circulating on social media. At first, it appeared on a private group thread, then leaked to a wider audience. By the next morning, thousands of strangers had seen the truth. My family's betrayal, their gaslighting, Sarah's breakdown, and my father's furious denials. The internet responded with ferocity. "How could parents do that to their child?" one comment read. Another, "This is financial abuse. This is criminal." The video gained traction, picked up by bloggers, and then by local news. Strangers flooded my inbox with messages of support, people who had lived through similar betrayals. people who finally felt seen. But for my family, the consequences were brutal. Sarah's company launched an internal investigation after the viral clip exposed her manipulation and the allegations of fraud. Colleagues distanced themselves, clients withdrew trust. She had once been the golden girl, her promotion celebrated as proof of her brilliance. Now whispers of dishonesty followed her everywhere. My parents fared no better. In our community, reputation had always been their strongest weapon. They had built an image of generosity, of leadership, of being the pillars others could lean on. That image shattered overnight. Neighbors stopped calling, old friends turned cold. At church, whispers followed them down every aisle. If they could do that to their own daughter, who else have they deceived? On paper, I had won. But victory carried a hollow weight. One evening, I sat in my apartment, the hum of the heater the only sound. The Christmas lights from the building across the street blinked faintly through my window. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, staring at the printed evidence spread across my coffee table. Documents, screenshots, recordings. Proof of everything I had endured. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined it. And yet, as I whispered to the empty room, the words slipped out before I could stop them. I still lost my family. The silence answered me back, pressing into my chest like a weight. I wiped at my eyes, angry at myself for still aching, for still longing for the people who had never chosen me. That night, as I closed my laptop, a notification pinged. I opened my email, expecting another message of sympathy from a stranger. Instead, my breath caught. It was from a publishing house. The subject line read, "We'd like to hear your story." They had seen the video. They wanted me to write a book about betrayal, survival, justice. My hands trembled as I read. Could my pain be transformed into something powerful? Something that might help others? I closed the laptop slowly, my mind racing. For the first time, I saw a future that wasn't just about surviving my family, but about reclaiming my voice. And still, I had one decision to make. I could destroy them completely, drag them through courts, strip away every shred of wealth and power they had left. Or I could stop here, choosing justice over annihilation. And so I chose. I didn't want to become like them, so obsessed with control that I lost myself. I would protect my name, my future, but I would not burn them to ashes. They had already destroyed themselves. Weeks later, Daniel knelt in front of me on the balcony of our new apartment. The city lights glittered behind him, and in his hand was a small velvet box. He looked at me with a steadiness that made my heart ache. Last time, our joy was poisoned by everyone else. This time it's only us, just you and me, Emily. No one else gets to take this moment away. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and for the first time in months, joy rose in me, untainted by fear. That night, I opened a new notebook, fresh pages crisp beneath my hand. I wrote slowly, carefully, letting the words root themselves. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. Because I knew the truth, survival wasn't enough. I wasn't meant just to endure. I was meant to rebuild. And as I set down my pen, I felt it, the quiet strength of someone who had walked through fire and emerged whole. The first step toward freedom wasn't glamorous. It wasn't bold or cinematic. It was a simple choice. I blocked my parents' numbers. I muted Sarah on every platform. I told myself that boundaries weren't cruelty. They were survival. For years, my life had been an open door, always accessible to their demands, their manipulation, their guilt. Now I was learning to lock it, to choose who could enter. At first, silence felt foreign, almost unbearable. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with another midnight call, another message dripping with guilt. But as days turned into weeks, the silence softened into something else, peace. I began speaking about my journey, not in courtrooms or viral videos, but into a small microphone in my apartment. I launched a podcast sharing my story piece by piece. Each episode, I talked about toxic loyalty, betrayal, gaslighting, and the courage it takes to say enough. I didn't expect much. It was therapy for me, a way to keep my voice from withering in the quiet. But the response stunned me. Emails and comments poured in from listeners around the world. People said, "You just told my story." Others whispered their secrets through anonymous notes. "I thought I was alone until I heard you." What had been a tiny project became something larger. Without meaning to, I had become a symbol, a face of survival for those suffocated by family chains. One evening, after recording, I scrolled through my inbox. Amid the dozens of messages was one that made me stop cold. The subject line read, "You saved me." The letter inside was simple, shaky with emotion. I was planning to give up. I thought there was no way out of the life my family trapped me in. Then I heard your words. I saw myself in you, and I decided to keep going. Thank you for saving my life. I pressed a hand to my lips, tears rising. For years, I had begged for my parents to see me, to value me. Now strangers saw me more clearly than they ever had. In that moment, I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a thread in a larger fabric, connecting survivors everywhere. And that gave my pain a purpose I hadn't known I needed. But purpose wasn't the only gift. Slowly, I built a new life, one not defined by absence, but by creation. Daniel and I moved to a small coastal town where the air smelled of salt and possibility. I pursued work that felt meaningful, helping others through coaching and writing. He found joy in a quieter career, free from the shadow of my family's judgment. The days grew steady. We planted a small garden. We walked along the cliffs at dusk. And in the stillness, I found something I never thought I would. Peace that didn't feel borrowed, but earned. Yet even in peace, memories lingered. Sometimes, in the soft hours of the night, I thought of my parents' voices, of Sarah's smirk. The hurt didn't vanish, but it no longer owned me. One afternoon, I sat by the ocean with a notebook in my lap. The waves crashed against the shore, gulls wheeling overhead. The page filled slowly as I wrote. I once thought losing my family meant losing everything, but the truth is, in losing them, I found myself. I closed the notebook, exhaling deeply. It wasn't a statement of bitterness, but of release. What I didn't know was that Daniel had been filming me quietly, his camera capturing the moment as the wind lifted my hair and the sea glittered behind me. Later, he posted a short clip with my permission. A fragment of me, writing by the water, paired with the words I had just spoken aloud. The video spread like wildfire. People shared it, quoted it, whispered it to one another. In losing them, I found myself. And just like that, the circle closed. I was no longer only the woman abandoned by her family. I was the survivor who had turned her scars into a lantern for others. Because this wasn't just the end of my story, It was the beginning of 1,000 others.